Hello and welcome to another video to teach you about the wonderful world of Latin. Today's video will teach you about the intensive adjective or pronoun. This is the next of our group of pronouns that we're going to learn. So far you've learned your demonstrative adjectives or pronouns, hic, haec, hoc, ille, illa, illud, and iste, ista, stud. Those are the pointing ones. The personal pronouns like I, we, you, y'all, he, she, it, they, like ego, tu, esse, id, nos, and vos. And you've learned the reflexive pronouns. And this video is going to add in the intensive pronouns. Now this is in the same chapter as your reflexive pronouns because the intensive pronoun ipse, ipsa, ipsum can often be translated like the reflexive pronouns. So myself, yourself, ourselves, yourselves, himself, herself, itself, and themselves. However, it's used pretty differently. So first let's talk about the difference between the two pronouns, and then we'll talk about the forms, and then we will review how to translate our intensifier. The intensifier is ipse, ipsa, ipsum. It is often used as an adjective, but it can function like a pronoun. So that's why it's used in this chapter of pronouns. And because it's used more like an adjective and can still function like a pronoun, it's kind of like your demonstrative adjectives, this, that, and those of yours, hic, haec, hoc, ille, illa, illud, and iste, ista, stud. They function very similarly. In fact, their forms are also very similar. So the intensifier is sort of like when you bold a word when you're typing or italicize it, or if you're sending a text message, if you use all capital letters in your message. So, for example, you could use the English sentence, Jupiter himself threw the thunderbolt. The himself is your intensifier. It's kind of like just bolding Jupiter and saying Jupiter threw the thunderbolt. Or if we want to see it more visually, it's kind of like pointing at Jupiter, this guy, he's the one who threw the thunderbolt. He did it. Or just bolding it and saying Jupiter himself threw the thunderbolt. Himself is one good translation here. We could also use other ways of saying the intensifier. So in the sentence, Jupiter struck down that very insulting person, it's sort of just intensifying the insulting person. That very would be the intensifier in Latin. So it's kind of like just saying Jupiter struck down the very insulting person. It's that guy. He's the one who he struck down. So let's look at how we use the intensive pronoun in Latin. So the forms don't change depending on the person. So if it's modifying first person, second person, or third person word, it's going to still be ipse, ipsa, ipsum. So you could say ego ipse for I myself did this. And the forms don't change if it functions like a pronoun or like an adjective, just like we saw with the demonstrative adjectives. So ipse medicus could be the doctor himself, the very doctor, the actual doctor. Or if we're referring to the doctor, we could just say ipse for he. So now let's move on to looking at the forms. Like I said, the forms of ipse, ipsa, ipsum are very similar to your demonstrative adjectives. And ille, illa, illud here is a good example that it has your ius in the genitives and I in the dative. And then the rest of the forms are your first and second declension endings. And this is exactly what we have for ipse, ipsa, ipsum. You have the ius in the genitive, and the dative is a single I ending. And then you have your ips as your stem, followed by your first and second declension endings for all your other numbers and cases and genders. The one thing to draw your attention, though, with this comparison is that ipsum is your neuter, singular nominative, and accusative instead of ipsude, which doesn't exist. So you already basically know these forms, so that's pretty nice. So let's look at them in a sentence to review how we'd end up translating with our intensive pronoun or adjective. If we have the sentence, puella tibi donum ipsum dat, the first thing to do is recognize that, yes, you have an intensifier, ipsum. The next thing to do is see what it modifies, if anything. And you'll notice that ipsum modifies donum because they're both neuter, accusative, singular. Just like all your other adjectives, they agree in gender, number, case. So then your next step would probably be to translate the rest of the sentence to see how it fits in to make sense of it initially. So the girl gives the gift to you. And then let's add in the intensifier. Ipsum's emphasizing the gift. So the easiest way to do this is just to say the girl gives the gift itself to you. The itself is being used to tell us more about the gift, to make it more intense, that it's that gift. That's the one we gave. You could also phrase it, if you don't like using itself, as the girl gives that very gift to you, or the girl gives the actual gift to you. One thing to consider as you translate the intensifier is that the itself could be herself or himself or themselves, depending on the thing it modifies. Here in English, a gift is an it, so we're using itself. In a similar vein, we should be careful when translating the intensifier that we don't confuse it with the reflexive pronoun. So in this sentence, Kikoro ipse se amabat, we have both the intensive pronoun ipse and the reflexive pronoun se. Now, we can translate both of them as himself in this sentence. So Cicero himself was loving himself. And that sounds a little bit weird in English, even though it's a perfectly good translation. The first himself, the Cicero himself, is the intensive adjective because it's modifying Cicero and saying it's Cicero. He's the one who's doing it. He's doing it. And the second himself, the Cicero was loving himself, is telling us more about who Cicero loved. It's the antecedent to Cicero, and Cicero loves himself. So it's a little bit weird in English, but you need to make sure to translate these two pronouns in a totally different, or translate them in the same way, but make sure that they are being used in a totally different way. And to do that, just make sure you go through each sentence carefully and slowly. So to give you a little bit more practice with translating them, here are 4 sentences that have some intensive pronouns and adjectives and some reflexive adjectives or reflexive possessive adjectives. So translate these sentences, then call me over and I'll check your work. Thank you for watching this video.